Hello and welcome to part 2 of my glacier dress project. Now in my last video I set out 2 goals. I hope to not only have the dress itself finished soon, but another video in the series ready to be published by the end of the month. I accomplished neither. Oops. This video will cover the skirt portion of the dress, which was a bit difficult to edit because I did not work on this project in any kind of straightforward order. In fact, I skipped around a lot to all the different parts of the dress and I changed my mind a bunch of times. But I'll try my best to explain the order in which things happened and my reasons for the choices I made. As you may have seen in my part 1 video, it's up here if you haven't, I began my design process by compiling and measuring my various lengths and styles of pale blue lace. The next order of business was figuring out how to cover a tape mark on the front skirt panel that I was unable to cut around. The narrow lace perfectly covered the mark, and I came up with an insertion lace design of crossed lines and teardrops. This narrow lace would be a purely decorative element. The widest lace would become part of the structure of the dress, acting as the waistband and attaching the flounce to the side and back skirt panels. This left the medium width scalloped lace, which I had the most yardage of, to act as the vertical seams in the construction of the skirt. So I've decided that it will be easier to treat this scalloped lace like real insertion lace if it had 2 straight sides. So I am going to add this much narrower lace sort of underneath and treat them as one width of lace. I set my trusty Bernina 830 to what I believe is called the running stitch. It is sort of a combination of straight and zigzag stitches, taking little stitches forward as it moves back and forth across the fabric. I figured this combo stitch would give the most stability to this join, and it would be much quicker than sewing along the scallops by hand. Okay, I've done a test piece, and I think it looks pretty great. So yeah, pretty happy with that. It went quickly, it pressed pretty nice and flat, and I'm gonna go with it. Yeah, so good experiment. Now with my very limited fabric, I am trying to make the absolute best possible use out of what I have. So I am going to, instead of stitching the other side of this lace down, I am going to trim pretty close to this edge, turn the very small amount of seam allowance back under and stitch it again, and then move this piece over and stitch it along the other edge. So I will probably give myself ½ inch, but I will also give myself ½ inch on the other side, so that's 1 inch. And I'm also adding this as close as possible to that piece, and actually adding the flat edge of the narrower lace to my wide scalloped lace is going to give me extra room as well. Because if I had left just the scalloped edge, then I would have to add the next edge in quite a ways to get to where, you know, the little valleys of the scallops are situated, and, you know, make sure that I have a good secure seam. So I'll probably get an extra 2 inches total in my skirt, all of which is going to get gathered into the back and hopefully give me lots of nice floofage at the back waist. At least that's the goal. Shoop. Bam. I am absolutely loving how this looks so far. Lace insertion is just one of my favorite things. Okay, while I had the side panels pinned onto the front panel, I marked the end of said panel. So now I just need to figure out how long the panel needs to be. So with my insertion lace and then measuring down, I want to give myself a generous 1/2 inch where I'm going to add the flounce, measuring down to the hem. Gives us just over 15.5 inches. So that's how long I'm going to need to make my flounce, which I have the fabric laid out on my ironing board, and it is just over 29 inches, about 29 3/8 inches. Now, this was one entire width of the fabric, which I cut in half and then stitched together. So I now have 3.5 yards. I did go ahead and overlock the 2 short ends of my flounce because this fabric frays really badly along the cross grain, which is perpendicular to the selvage. But I left the long top edge alone because it doesn't fray badly at all on the straight grain. So that's just an interesting note. So now I have my 29-inch fabric, and I need to add tucks to make it shorter, down to 15.5. So I get to add a lot of tucks to this. I think it's going to be fun. Okay, here's just a test of a bunch of tucks put in, and getting me down to just over 16 inches, so pretty close. I counted and it was 13 tucks, which is probably a bit excessive, so I may end up cutting some of the length off that I don't need for this ruffle. I kind of like the more spaced out look of these rather than the really, really crowded ones, where each tuck is laying right on top of what will be the stitching line of the next one. So I think I would like to do 5 above the lace and then 5 below, and I need to make sure I leave enough room at the bottom for the hem, which is probably going to be rather deep. So it's going to take probably a little bit of math, unfortunately. I have decided to hem this dress to the tallest of my Edwardian heels, which will help with my ruffle issues, because I didn't want to lose 2 inches of hem in the ruffle, so I decided to see how much length I could get away with. So I've pinned the waistband lace around myself, pinned the front panel to the lace at the waist, and tried on my shoes, and I think I can get away with a lot more length than I originally thought. So I'm probably just going to turn up the edge once, and I think I'm going to add some lace at the hem. But wait, I hear you ask, wasn't all of your lace already accounted for? Well, yes, but I decided to break out my box of seam tape. I have a lot of vintage seam tape, but it's technically lace, and I found this bit, which is the perfect color, and this, it was unopened. This is how it was originally packaged, with one layer of the lace on top of a piece of white paper, so you can see what the actual color is and not what it looks like when it's all stacked on top of itself. 3 full yards of very close to perfect. So I think I'm going to use this for the hem. I'm just going to see if I have enough of it to go around the ruffle, which is just under 3 yards, and the front panel. Yeah, I have this much more than 3 yards, so like 5 extra inches. Wow, when you're good, you're good. Okay, here I am changing the design of the skirt, just the ruffle portion. I was browsing for some inspiration on Pinterest to figure out the pattern I wanted to use for the tucks in the ruffle, and I found these images that have double ruffles, and I thought, oh, that is actually a perfect use of my fabric, because no matter how many tucks I put in this, it was going to be far too long, and I didn't like the idea of cutting off and wasting fabric that I could otherwise use. So I'm going to do the double ruffle, and I'm going to use this pretty, technically hem tape, or seam tape, as the hem of the top ruffle, and then I will just hem the bottom ruffle along with the front hem, you know, just like a normal turn under twice. So to that end, I have this fabric left over, which is a little bit longer than what I need for the ruffle, so I will be able to give it some gathering. And I have, from here to here is 9 inches. This is the fold, so I'll be able to get 2 lengths of this. Sew it together and make one base for the bottom ruffle to attach to underneath, and then the top ruffle will sit on top of this base. So I'm thinking something like this, with the wider insertion lace covering the seam where the bottom ruffle will attach to the under ruffle, I guess I'm going to call it, and then have the shorter top ruffle at about 6 inches above that, and the under ruffle and the top ruffle will be attached together to the much wider insertion lace that will attach it to the rest of the skirt panels. I hope this is making sense. So this ruffle will be about 7 inches long, and this one will be 6, so very close to the same height. And I should be able to get 3 tucks in each ruffle, and then allow for about 2 inches at the bottom for the hem. So that, I think, is going to be my plan going forward. I'm hoping that this makes it even more floofy and ruffly at the bottom with a double ruffle. I'm really excited to see how this works out. Okay, I've made a few decisions about this skirt. The first being the length of this ruffle, which I determined based on the length of this piece, which I have now spliced into the back seam. This smaller piece also was on the selvage edge because I wanted to just be able to turn up the entire bottom hem once. So that piece was about 12 inches long before I hemmed it. Finished both seam edges with a nice flat felled seam. And that is going to be my lower ruffle. I'm also going to put tucks into this, and I hemmed it first because I have found that it's much easier to add tucks to a hem when it's already hemmed, just to make sure that they're nice and even and the same width, same spacing all the way around. The other decision I have made is that I want to add more vertical length to the center back seam, which is going to be this piece here. I am still going to use this wide insertion lace for joining the ruffle, double ruffle now, to the panel on the side back, but I want to add more length at the back because I want to have lots of nice hip and bum padding to give the beautiful Edwardian hourglass shape. So I do want the skirt to be slightly longer in the back. Now currently this seam is 1 inch longer than this seam or this seam, but I'm going to want more than just 1 inch. So I dug out, and it took me quite a lot of searching to find the piece that I cut off of the bodice. when I wanted to shorten it. So I'm going to use this, I think, to piece in a section above the lace, and it's going to need to be off grain slightly because I don't have enough to really get what I want if I keep it on the grain. I don't think. We shall see. And then I'm going to put this insertion lace, it's actually seam binding, but I'm going to use it as insertion lace, at this seam, and then have the wider lace follow that line so it'll be a bit diagonal here. And I'm hoping it doesn't look too silly. We'll see. Alright, here's what I've come up with. This was the most width I was able to get out of the piece at the center. And I remembered that I wanted to have this insertion lace doubled at the back seam. So I moved this down to cover that join, and then it gives me a little bit more room to play with over here. And I added the wide insertion lace along the bottom. Now when I get to this junction, it's going to be, well, it could be a little messy because this, of course, is going to taper, but it doesn't quite taper into nothing. So I need my lace to sort of turn here in order to smoothly move along the bottom of this panel. But then it occurred to me, I don't actually need it to move smoothly here because I can just continue the same angle and I can make this part shorter, because over here I have a lot of ruffle to play with and I haven't finalized the amount of tucks I'm going to add yet. So I can actually just make this section shorter, move that up, and put in fewer tucks or smaller tucks to make it equal the length here. I just need this total length to match the front panel, but it doesn't need to be as long up here. So moving back over here, I can make this a nice gentle curve that just continues up to there, and that will actually make this length longer, I think. I'm not sure I love how it looks. It might look better on the finished piece. I don't know, it might just be really awkward to have this section pieced in here, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Okay, this is quite the serendipitous moment. I was really just trying to make sure the horizontal line of the insertion lace matched up at the center back seam, and was not even trying, but the scalloped motif of the lace matches up almost perfectly without me even trying. So that's pretty cool. I am going to, I think, baste these together by hand because it's a very, very narrow overlap that I have. And then I will come back and zigzag by machine over my basting just to make it very, very secure. And I'm only going to go up to about this far from the waist because I am going to leave this open as the skirt opening, and the plan is for the whole back to be very densely gathered so that the fact that this is open here will not show at all when I'm wearing it. It will just look closed. So I'm not going to have any sort of fastening on the part of the skirt that's below the waistband. The waistband will have fastenings, but below will be open. Alright, the side back is now constructed, and I have pinned the wide insertion lace along the bottom just to see how it's going to look and how far up the curve is going to take this seam here. I think I'm liking how it looks. I wasn't initially thrilled about the interruption of the horizontal line here, but I think it's gonna work. I think when the skirt is all gathered up at the back and worn over a petticoat and given the adequate floof that the ruffle will add at the bottom, I think it's going to look okay. And I did measure. The center back seam is a good 5 inches longer than this side front seam will be now. So I think I have added enough length to the back of my skirt to account for my nice bum pad, and if I wear it without, then I'll have a bit of a train, which is kind of fun. Time to sew the tucks in the bottom ruffle. I really like making tucks. I use a small ruler to measure the depth of my fold and ensure it is even all the way around. And I didn't film it, but I usually press this edge to give it a nice crease before stitching. Then I line up the folded edge with the seam allowance guidelines on the machine stitch plate to give the tuck an even width. Repeat these steps 2 more times, or however many you need for the number of tucks you desire. And then give everything a nice press. Alright, I have the lower ruffle tucks done. I absolutely love the way that this looks, and I think that the tucks will actually give a little bit more structural integrity to the ruffle, make it stand out a bit more. They are spaced evenly and they are even widths, and they just look really nice. I'm really excited about this. I love it. So now I just need to figure out what I'm doing with the lace. I have a few options, and I have measured, and I have enough to do the basic design I want to do on the bodice and the full width of this ruffle. So I could put it in as insertion lace, just as a pretty decorative element, give, you know, extra sheerness to the ruffle there, and sort of fill in this gap between the top tuck and the top of the ruffle. Or I could actually use this lace to cover the join where this ruffle will get attached to the under ruffle. I would have this much extra lace if I do the insertion over the seam. And I am sorely tempted to do that. First of all, because I think it will look really pretty, and secondly, because I like having extra lace to play with. I use my machine with the longest possible stitch length for my gathering threads. With longer lengths of fabric like this, I will stop and cut my thread at the halfway point, and then start again. I typically stitch 2 rows of gathers, with space between them for the seam stitching line, where the ruffle will be attached to the base fabric. I pin the centers and the ends of the ruffle and base fabric together, easing in the gathers evenly between the pins. Pulling up both lines of gathering stitches together creates a smoother and more manageable line of gathers.
Then I simply sew straight down the space between the gathering threads.
Here is my gathered ruffle sewn to the under ruffle. Oh, I love it so much. It is going to be so floofy and swooshy. Yes, I love it. And remember, the under ruffle is also going to be gathered up to the wide insertion lace, and then another ruffle will go here. So now it is time to add my insertion lace over the seam. Never done a gathered seam before. So wish me luck, we'll see how this goes.
I realized almost immediately that I needed to fold down the seam allowance and pin it out of the way before I could stitch the lace along the top edge. Then I treated it the same as normal insertion lace. You can watch my previous video for a brief tutorial. It's linked in the description. Bobbin winding break. Be warned, if you make yourself a lingerie dress, they take a lot of thread. Fortunately, they are usually white, and white thread is easy to obtain in large quantities. I definitely made a couple trips to the fabric store to get more of the pale mint green color that best matched my fabric, somehow, over the nearly 2 years that I've been working on this dress. Though I think I did use an off-white color for the top stitching on the lace.
Alright, I've got the top edge stitched down, and I have freed the seam allowance so that it's now folded back up and it will be out of the way for doing the bottom. And I've had a really annoying thought, which is that it would be cool to have the original scalloped edge of the lace back. So I'm thinking about removing this extra edge lace and actually sewing carefully down each scallop before cutting away and, you know, folding the fabric back. Do I really want to do this? Is this a good idea? Especially over the ruffle where it's all going to be gathered. I don't know. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. TBD. Okay, so clearly I decided to unpick the additional lace and go with the original scalloped lace. I really love how it looks, even without it being sewn down and the interior fabric trimmed away. And I think I have a solution for the gathers, because as you can see, my gathering thread is way up here and doesn't do a lot of good for making this all nice and even. But I can easily fix that by simply running another gathering thread underneath the lace, pulling that up, and then I can kind of stroke the gathers from there and get them all nice and even and laying prettily under the scallops before I sew it down. So that is currently the plan, and here I go.
Yes, in case you were wondering, steering my stitching along the edge of the scallops was a bit tedious. but it was so worth it in the end.
Okay, I have sewn down the insertion lace on both sides. I have removed all the gathering stitches, and now it's time to cut away. I think I've left enough seam allowance above this that I can just cut off that edge. Let's see how it goes.
Okay, I need to apologize in advance for the exposure in these next several clips. I didn't realize my camera settings were so badly off for the lighting in my sewing studio. I did my best to fix the exposure and color balance in post-production, but it still looks pretty bad. But don't worry, it does get better. Now, I would have just cut this footage, but I wanted to show how I used a pin, and sometimes a plastic point turner, to carefully fold the seam allowance under the presser foot as I zigzagged over it. The pin worked better.
In keeping with my theme of just making decisions, I am moving on to the top ruffle. I do want this pretty blue lace edging to be the hem of the ruffle, and I have exactly 3 yards of it, so I decided to cut my remaining piece into 3-yard long segments. Well, technically 4, but I don't need one of them. I just cut this off at 1 yard plus seam allowance. I don't need this bit, and I don't need this bit. So I will piece these 3 lengths together, make my ruffle, then I will add the lace to the hem and put in however many tucks of whatever width I need to bring up the length of the ruffle to what I need to fill in above the bottom ruffle.
More tucks for the top ruffle. Same process as before.
And the top ruffle is complete. So I can finally finish assembling this flounce and attach it to the side back skirt.
Whenever I remove gathering stitches, I like to keep the thread for future use. For some reason I chose to hand sew the seam allowance down under the insertion lace. Probably so I could sit on my comfy couch and watch TV. But possibly also because this seam was bulkier, with 2 layers of gathered fabric instead of just 1.
I finished the flounce today. Look at it! I love it so much. It's so floofy and swooshy. It is exactly what I wanted, and I am over the moon. I cannot wait to see it on the finished garment, so I'm going to go sew it to the skirt now. Okay, I have pinned the skirt to the waistband and I'm trying it on with my shoes. Just wanted to confirm that the hem is going to be good in the front. I've just pressed said hem. I have not stitched it yet, but I wanted to make sure I can walk. I'm not going to be tripping on it. but it also floats just above the ground, which is what I wanted. And currently it has a slight train in the back, but that is also because I'm not wearing my hip padding, so when I have all the proper padding behind me, it should be roughly the same length all the way around. And I am ridiculously happy with this skirt. I love it so much. I can't wait until the entire dress is completed and I can wear it and just flounce around. Finally, after 2 summers of wanting to finish this dress, planning to finish this dress by the end of the summer and not getting it done 2 years in a row, now I will have it for the beginning of the summer. So, I might just wear it all summer, because why not? Now, although the dress is not finished, I can give you a reveal of the skirt. It is incredibly fun to wear, and I'm really looking forward to getting the whole dress put together. If you enjoyed this latest installment of the Glacier Dress saga, please do give me a like. And if you are invested in seeing me finish this mammoth project, definitely subscribe. And I will see you soon. Bye.